Everybody. Welcome to Drupal Providence, the first one for 2021. Coming back, we took a little time off there, so I appreciate everybody making time tonight to join us, and it's gonna be a fun one. I'm gonna go through a couple of intro slides here, and then I'm gonna hand it off to Tim to do his thing. So first things first. We did a survey, and the survey results came in, and basically what we heard was that going to a quarterly format for Drupal Providence is going to be best. So we are going to try that for this year and see how it works out. 2021, all of our events will be virtual, and they will be at 8 p.m. Eastern. So that was kind of the consensus through the results there, that everybody thought later at night on the East Coast was a better time frame. So thank you if you filled out the survey. We appreciate that. We have a Slack channel. I don't know if everybody knows that, but if you go to the Drupal Slack and you look for Drupal Providence, it's there. I post up helpful stuff, and I also send out reminders for the meetup. And it's just a great place to generally chat with folks in the Drupal sphere in the Providence area, or maybe not even in the Providence area. So check that out if you're so inclined. There are a couple of things happening in the coming weeks. Drupal NYC is actually happening next week, it looks like, which is interesting because it's the performance makeovers, avoiding agency nightmares. There's that word again. High availability Azure, which that could be interesting to some folks. We have the Boston Drupal meetup, which is on the 9th. The subject for that is TBD. Mike's looking for a speaker, it sounds like. So if you are interested in being a speaker, you could probably reach out to Mike, and he'll probably welcome you with open arms. The San Francisco Drupal Users Group is doing a Be a Smarter Drupal Superhero. Not 100% sure what that's about. I think there was a subtitle there that I may not have included, but if you're interested, you can check that out. And last but not least, we are going quarterly, but the next Drupal Providence will be on May 13th. And we will be talking to Jason Palmentel about a project that he's been architecting for the state of Rhode Island. So that's going to be a pretty interesting talk, talking about how they're using Acquia Site Factory, Pattern Lab, and of course, Drupal. So join us for that. So we have with us Tim Lehnen, the CTO of the Drupal Association, here to talk about Drupal.org's new merge request system. And he has probably a couple of other things to talk about too that could be super interesting. So no pressure, Tim. But I'm going to hand it over to Tim and let him do his thing.
So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to go through some slides about contribution on Drupal.org in general, a little bit about the history of contribution in the Drupal project, and then talk about the new tools. Hopefully, many of you have already had the chance to use some of these tools, but maybe I'll have a couple little details here that you haven't seen before. And also, at any time, feel free to interrupt me with a question or to put something in a chat window. If you don't want to interrupt the flow, I'll take a look at those too. And then at the end, I would love for anybody who wants to sort of follow along as I just show. We can all make a test merge request, a test issue, test merge request of our own for anybody who hasn't done it yet, just to see how easy it really is. So thanks again for having me. Really appreciate being here. Thank you for the invitation, John. And I will dive right in. Anybody who's been around Drupal knows that we have some of our own vocabulary around our contributions, right? We use issues to discuss improvements for projects. And historically, of course, we've done everything in patches, our manually generated diffs between two sets of code. Issue forks are a phrase that might sound a little odd because we sort of coined it It's like forks in other tool sets like GitHub or GitLab.com in a vanilla context. It's a copy of the the project's Git repository that lets us draft those changes. And we'll be talking about merge requests, which are completely analogous to pull requests in GitHub. So first, stepping back and talking about like what's been going on in the last year's worth of contribution, some milestones that we've reached, some things like that. So thanks to contributors like yourselves out there, we're already close to 90% of the top 1,000 modules being Drupal 9 compatible. And many of that remaining 10% or so are modules that wound up getting moved into core, right? So there's no need to port views or anything like that at this point. So that's really good. And we've seen an acceleration of contributions that's happened as we've started rolling out modernization to the tools. If you happen to be working on your own client projects and you're not already familiar with these tools, but you need to work on updates for an 8 to 9 transition or still a 7 to 9 or something like that, there are tools in the community, Drupal check and the PHP update bot and things like that, that you can take a look at and might help you, even with custom code, get your compatibility stuff put together. Similarly, what did 2020 look like in terms of contribution for the Drupal project? So there were more than 32,000 issues fixed over the course of 2020. That's a 13% increase in contribution last year, actually. There were a little bit over 8,000 individual contributors, more than 1,200 organizational contributors that were all credited on those issues. And since we launched merge requests, which was well into last year, towards the end of the year, in fact, there have been more than 3,000 merge requests already created, 1,300 of those merged, and close to 400 of those in the core issue queue. So there's good adoption on some of the new tools and a lot of people still involved in doing contribution all around the community, which is really good to see. Just a little bit about Drupal.org itself. We don't often share this analytics data, but in case you're curious, in 2020, there was close to 10 million unique visitors to Drupal.org, which means close to 65 million page views across the project, 60,000 issues created, 22,000 other nodes, probably documentation, forum posts, all sorts of things like that. Tons and tons of comments and user growth in our confirmed user base. So really good stuff there last year. And one of the reasons that the tooling that I'm about to describe to you works the way that it does is because Drupal has a uniquely collaborative community when it comes to how we solve problems, right? We come together and we work in a single issue with one problem statement, and we propose different resolutions working together to try and achieve the right solution. So we don't typically work like the standard GitHub workflow where you have someone makes their own fork, someone else makes a fork, someone makes a fork of a fork, and eventually one of those gets pulled back in, but you're kind of scattered out into this realm of forks and forks. So just pulling some data about this, the average number of people who were credited on a Drupal core issue was more than 5 people, right? When we say it's collaborative, the average issue in core gets more than 5 people involved in getting it over the finish line, which is really pretty cool. And you can see here some other averages around some other projects that have been around. So let's talk about history of contribution tooling. This is code-centric, but a lot of our, especially our older history, is really code-centric in and of itself. So this goes back to 2001. This is 20 years ago. This is what an issue description on Drupal.org looks like. And bear in mind that the Drupal project itself and Drupal.org are both older than Git. So there was no Git. This was all CVS. This was all showing off, trading patches practically by email, like the Linux kernel even does today. But and then from there, things evolved a little bit. People started building some very basic tools, like they'd made scripts to do things like check code style, but they were run manually on folks' local machines and output posted back to the issue queue. We started, doing some tooling around our patch files and things like that. And then in 2011, the Drupal project switched over to using Git for version control. So there was for those who were around at the time and doing contribution, there was a big migration to Git on the back end as far as our sort of management of code for the Drupal project. And that was a whole big thing. And it was probably the first time that we talked about, hey, could we have new tools on Drupal.org? And it took years before we really truly modernized. I'll skip through here a little bit. We started adding things like automatic commit messages and core crediting messages and all these sorts of things to our tooling, again, to sort of support the Drupal way of doing things. And then by 2019, we did the first phase of this migration to GitLab. So in 2019, that's when we migrated all of the repositories from Drupal.org's own Git service to a self-hosted instance of GitLab. So all your issues were the same, and people were still submitting patches and all that stuff. But on the back end, we had the GitLab tooling. So where have things gone from there, and what's the state of tools right now that we can kind of look at together? So I talked about this earlier. We wanted to maintain the Drupal way of working on things. So this diagram kind of represents the Drupal flow. We want a single issue as a centralized place for discussion of a problem. And then we want one or more workspaces where people can work on that problem, propose their resolution, and have that information go back into the issues. So on Drupal.org, if you open any new issue on pretty much any new project, you see this new green button that says, hey, create an issue fork. And it'll be a fork based on the, a default branch, and you can adjust the name of the fork. And this will spin up a forked version of this project in GitLab and allow you to work with it. So for example, as soon as you've created that issue fork, it will show you the fork at the top in the files area of the Drupal.org issue queue. It's going to show you the branch information about whether there's an open merge request, Drupal CI test results, and a button for getting push access. Another way that this differs from other tools is we allow any collaborator, and we've always done this, to come into an issue and then start participating in code changes. So they just have to push that green button and they can now jump into that same workspace and work on it the same way that they could have downloaded a patch, applied it, and generated their own patch before, right? So they don't have to wait for a maintainer to say, yeah, okay, you can come help me with this. That's all handed automatically in Drupal.org's connection to our GitLab instance. There's also some useful tools here to help you out. So if you prefer to do all of your contribution on the command line, this show commands button in the upper right expands down and automatically gives you the git remotes and git checkout commands that you would need for this new issue fork that you've just created. So you can add the remote and check out the branch and start doing your changes with whatever local environment you have, and start working with these merge requests on the command line. But you can also, and I'm hoping again that we can kind of all do this live, you can also do a complete contribution cycle without ever touching the command line and without using any local tools. So you can use your issue fork, open your issue fork in the GitLab user interface, use the GitLab web IDE, make code changes, add files, add comments, do reviews, all sorts of things, and create a commit and a merge request without ever leaving your browser. Which is a really nice change, particularly for anyone who's joined the community recently and is used to the GitHub way of doing things. So when those changes are ready, we can open a merge request. So that option will appear on the branch. Once there's changes on a branch, there's a button that just fills everything out for you. You can also use the open merge request button inside the GitLab interface and just click on that. That'll generate that merge request and it'll take you to what it looks like in GitLab, and people can use the comments here and all those other details to just take a look at that. Once it's open, any testing that's configured on core or on your contributed project that you might be working on will automatically run just the way it used to run on patches, and you'll be able to see all those results. And anybody else, a maintainer coming into your merge request, so how do we think about a merge request related to a patch, right? A merge request is like when you upload that patch and maybe say, hey, needs review. You think it doesn't need work. Maybe it needs someone to come in. Choosing to open your merge request is saying, hey, this is now ready for someone else to look at it, right? So then your maintainer may come in and they can make issue comments, of course, but they can also use these code review tools, line by line code review and code suggestions of changes within an existing merge request. What's really cool about this is all that activity gets posted back to the Drupal.org issue automatically. So even if you are using the inline merge request code commenting tools and all this kind of stuff on in GitLab, someone new coming into the issue is going to see what's been going on in a single threaded, easy to understand conversation. So those details get marked here. You sort of see this at the bottom. On merge request 68, someone commented X, et cetera, et cetera. And it even has an indicator to say if that comment on the code review side is resolved or still open. So all that activity is still there. And so there's a lot less workarounds that you need to do. You don't need Dredditor. You have code review tools that are all available in the GitLab interface. You don't need to create interdiffs or diffs between commits because there's a button on all of the branches and all the commits that will let you generate that for you. Lots of things that we had to do sort of manually that are now taken care of for you. Keeping up with the upstream is also very easy. There's a simple rebase option, or you can merge from origin and all that stuff and have conflict resolution using the UI for merge conflicts. So I promise I will actually show what this looks like in more detail, but there's also some issues open. So once we dive into actually using this and trying this out, if you find things where you're like, gosh, I think this could be better, or here's a feature request, there are a number of issues open in Drupal.org's issue queue for this integration itself. And we are making continual improvements and adding new things to the tooling set. And I'll talk about some of those things that we've added since this first launch. For example, something that we very, very recently added just in the last month or so is Drupal.org actually has a new project type. So there's now a type for what we call general projects, because we frankly couldn't come up with a better name. And those are for things that aren't modules, aren't themes, aren't distributions, but are part of the Drupal ecosystem. In particular, what we mean is JavaScript components. So this general project type exists because Drupal as a project is bigger than PHP. And there's a big core initiative around JavaScript and decoupled Drupal experiences that's focused on making non-PHP code components a sort of first-class citizen of contribution and of the Drupal code base. So you can now create these general projects on Drupal.org. They can be JavaScript components, they could be Drush extensions, they could be all those kinds of things that never really fit in Drupal.org's project categories before. And you can even, instead of just relying on Drupal CI, we can enable GitLab CI pipelines for you. So for example, the Decoupled Menus Initiative has published their first package to NPM, their first JavaScript package library, once.js, from Drupal.org to NPM. So that's a big milestone. That's the first time the Drupal project has published code to a package manager for non-PHP code. So it's really, really, really cool. And that's all part of this whole big tooling stack that goes together. So I'm going to pause for a moment and say the only reason we could do this is because of all the members of the community out there like you who've helped us. People who have memberships with the Drupal Association kind of directly fund my team. There's only 4 of us, including myself, who work on the engineering side of this, making all this happen. So thank you to all of you who are members. Thank you to Leslie, who serves on our board. It really makes a big difference. So I would like to kind of workshop this. And actually, I'm going to share my screen. I don't know of the people who are on here, how many of you frequently contribute, don't contribute at all. Like, I don't know the relative skill levels of folks on Drupal.org. So just follow along only if you're comfortable. But let me stop sharing here and share something new, and I'll drop in some links. So in order to follow along, you will need a Drupal.org account. And again, if anyone on here's already used the merge request stuff, of course, you're all good. You've got this figured out. But there's just a few things that you would need to do in order to make this happen, right? So if you are on Drupal.org itself, the first thing to do is go up, make sure you're logged in, and check in your account whether you've accepted the Get Access agreement. So when you go to your profile page, you'll see here there's an option for your Get Access information. And there's a button here that you can check to agree to the terms. So if you've never done that, it's something project maintainers or people contributing code will do. You can hop in here, check that box, and then you should be good to go for the rest of kind of the example that I'm doing. So from here, I'm going to put this link in the chat. And again, if you're interested, it's totally up to you. Go ahead and follow me to this example project. This is just a sort of sample that we were playing around with when we were testing out the functionality of that JavaScript library. So we can, yes, it is on production, but we can go ahead and create issues here and it's not a problem. So what I'm going to do is basically just create a test merge request. So I'm going to go to the list of existing issues for this project, and you can follow every step that I'm doing. Feel free to create the new issue just as I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit create a new issue, just like I would for any other contribution on Drupal.org. And I'm going to say Tim's test issue at Drupal Providence. You can give your own issue a similar title if you'd like. And I'll just give myself a quick description here, experimenting with merge requests at the Drupal Providence meetup. So this part, if you've ever done any issue reports on Drupal.org, should be familiar, right? We're just making an issue the same way we would before. We have to set some of the metadata. We'll call this a task. Say it's code. We give an issue summary, right? And then we save our new issue. So here's that new button that I was talking about, create an issue fork. So, if I was really making a real issue, maybe I want to change some kind of file. So creating this issue fork is what's going to give me that workspace. So when I click that button, what's happening in the background here is our Drupal.org is telling our GitLab instance to fork this to a project workspace, and it's creating a branch, a default branch, and I can add new branches and all these things, and I can go take a look. So if I click here, I can see my, this is a issue fork of the general example project, and it has the issue number and a link to the issue that I just came from, so that I can get back to the issue if this is where I started from. And so if I'm in here, I can go ahead and let me actually create a new branch as well. So branch name, Tim's test. It's going to do this for me. All right. So, and like I just said, I might lose track of my issue. I need to get back to it. So let me find that link. Live demos are always risky. Okay. So now I've got an issue fork. And if I want to contribute, again, I don't have to use my local command line Git tools. I don't have to use a local IDE. I certainly can if I want to. But if you're someone like me who's only a mediocre developer, I've always been a better project manager than developer. Maybe I just want to fix like documentation or code comments or something like that. Like I can click into the web IDE. I can go to the README. I'm already in an editing view. I can say, this is Tim's edit to the README. And again, feel free to do this if you've opened an issue by now and are playing with your own issue fork. It is totally safe for you to go ahead and make such a change. And that should be fine. So once I do that, I have a commit button down here. I can do my usual, it's going to give me my sort of diff that I can review. And I can choose to just do a regular commit, or if I think I'm ready for other people to look at it, I can start a merge request. So I'm just going to say, yeah, update readme MD. I'm going to go ahead and have it start a merge request. And let's see what kind of activity it's going to show on Drupal.org yet. Not much, because I haven't opened that merge request yet. So that's fine. So I'll start a merge request. I don't need to do any of these buttons. I just need, it's all pre-filled thanks to the Drupal.org integration. And so now I have a merge request open. So again, if you're following along, what we've done is we made our issue fork, we clicked into it, we clicked into the web IDE and edited a file, we committed it and started the merge request. And then if we go back to the issue and refresh, now we see, hey, there's merge request number 9. Its current status is mergeable. So that's kind of start to finish what it takes to get a merge request here. And I've got a comment that was automatically added to indicate that I opened this merge request. I could go into the merge request and say, don't worry, this is just a test. Post that comment. And again, we can see on my test issue here that that's automatically posted back. So it's in both places. It's in the GitLab UI and it's on Drupal.org, which I think is incredible in terms of being able to maintain that thread of conversation. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of as easy as that. I may have run through it a little quickly. Any thoughts, questions? Anybody been following along with me? How'd it go for you so far?
This is amazing. First of all, amazing. The one thing that occurs to me as we go through this whole thing, and I do remember what a pain in the butt the whole patches and re-rolls and all of that stuff was, and I love to see this. But I'm curious about one thing, which is CW Egan's composer patches, whatever that thing is called. Like, I know that I've done some things where I've had to patch something, and even before it's accepted and even before it becomes part of the process, as soon as it's up there on Drupal.org, then you can grab that patch with composer and
yes. So
your project.
yeah. So right. So this
what happens to that?
This is a really good topic. Yeah. So if you're so we've all done this if we worked in Drupal, especially in prior versions pre-composer, right? Where there's some patch sitting in the issue queue that you need for your project. It hasn't been committed by the maintainer yet. And so you can, put that in your old Drupal, Drush make files. You could put a link to that patch file on Drupal.org right in there. In merge request land, you can get a plain diff, which accomplishes the same thing in terms of giving you a patch URL. It's automatically there for any existing merge request. And there is a way to get it, like if there isn't even a merge request open and you need a specific commit that's in progress or something like that. There's details about some of this in the documentation on Drupal.org. So you will find under the developer guide on Drupal.org, there's a whole section about issue forks and merge requests that gives you sort of all the details that you might need. There's a little bit of a video like this, similar. Oh, it's one I recorded, I think, similar to what I just did today, and has a number of these different things. And I'm almost certain that on this or a sub page there is a patching. Yeah, there's some patching information, I think. So, but yeah, there are things like that we're still looking at. Maybe we make some more tools. Another thing we're looking at doing, if we can, is there's still thousands of Drupal.org issues that have patches, and we can probably automatically open merge requests for all those patches and see if we could get the maintainers to actually be able to just click a button and finally get those things across the finish line. So that's something we're hoping to be able to do.
That's amazing. But then also just what you were pointing out is just that like GitLab itself already, as soon as there's a merge request, then there will be like a plain view of the patch.
Yes.
Is what something I can actually put into my composer.json in my CW Egan's little stanza there, and that will work.
Yeah, exactly. So you can get the equivalent of your old school patch file to put in any of those things if you need to. As a best practice, I might suggest making a local copy that you commit rather than doing, like, it was never an officially supported thing to be pointing to remote files just randomly hosted on D.O, but that's just what we all did. Yeah, that's documented. There's some folks who've gone through this, including Cameron of that, who made that plugin, coming up with some best practices. We're sort of having to learn some new best practices now that some of the tooling has changed around it. Other quick questions from people who've tried this out? Or does anybody stuck and wants me to go back a step if you're doing it, if you're following along on your own?
If you look at the issue queue, it is littered, as well as the merge requests. There are about 5 merge requests in there. So
Okay, good. Well, awesome. That's great. I'm glad to see it. So let me switch over my screen share again because I have a few more things to share related to this tooling that I think will be well received. So it should be saying workshop again if that's all working properly. Great. So the next thing, live deployment previews. So if you look at issues in the current Drupal core issue queue, so feel free to check out anything in the Drupal core queue, anything there that has an open merge request. Let me see if I can find a real example here. Anything that has an open merge request should be automatically generating a preview. So I'll put an example in chat, and maybe actually I'll switch my screen share again.
So this like simply test me.
It's actually, so yeah, so this is built by, the underlying technology is Tugboat QA, which is the same underlying tool that the Simply Test Me folks are doing. So they worked together with Simply Test Me to use that to build it into Simply Test Me, and then we all worked together to build it into Drupal.org. So this button, which has changed a little bit from my slide to what the current version looks like, so I will switch my screen share just to show you. So here I'm in the core issue queue for something about resource type aliases. There's a merge request open in this. It's passed all of its tests. I could go in and add a test if I wanted to test against a different PHP or MySQL version. But here, right now, you see a view live preview, and it says suspended. That's the state of the preview, which means it might take a second. When I click on this button, it's going to unsuspend this preview. So you can see here it's resuming, starting, getting services ready. As soon as it's done, just going to take a second. Okay, here is a site preview with that patch installed, with that merge request applied. And I don't remember if it's like admin or whatever, but I can log in and go test this out, right? Like I can see right here, this merge request applied to a preview site, which is awesome because that is going to drastically improve the ability of people to do reviews, right? I don't have to set up a local dev environment. I don't need, all my local PHP, or I don't need to set up a local Docker environment. However you're doing it, I no longer have to do that to be able to review someone's changes. And especially, again, for people who are doing accessibility review, usability, documentation, the kinds of folks who maybe are not living and breathing an IDE every day, in which I include myself, it's just so much easier to do a review. We worked with the Tugboat folks to put this together. They did a lot of help. It was great. They worked with Simply Test Me. We all coalesced around putting together a solution for this. So this has existed in the Drupal core issue queue for a little over a month now, I think. And it is going to be available in Contrib pretty soon. And by pretty soon, I shouldn't say things like this. By pretty soon, I might mean very, very soon. I'll just leave it there. And so any Contrib modules will be able to do the same thing, have that same live deployment preview of whatever merges they have. One of the big things that we're really trying to do, I'll switch back over my screen share again, is we're really trying to make the burden of maintainership as light as possible for folks. So we have a lot of folks who we just want to make sure that they're ready to make their modules ready for Drupal 10, right, when that comes around, and that it's just as easy as possible for them to review changes, review patches and merge requests, to do all of that stuff, right? Like, if you maintain any modules, you may have seen the bot that we used to automatically give you a compatibility fix to get your 8 module working with Drupal 9. Like, that was posted by a bot as a patch to all these issues. Next time we do that, it'll be posted as a merge request, and it'll be a 1-button click for all these maintainers to just be Okay, if all you need is this compatibility strings change, if it's an automatable fix, it'll be a 1-button click to make 9 modules compatible with 10.
Wow.
So that will be really cool. I'm super excited. Yeah, that's kind of what I got. I'm really happy to show it off with all of you and give you the chance to try out the tools. I'd love to answer any more questions if you have them, or to follow up after the fact if anybody would like to reach out and learn more about any of these things. But otherwise, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate being here. And with that, I will switch us back to our gallery of faces.
Tim,
Any
can I ask you-
questions?
yeah, can I ask one quick question?
Go for it.
So in order to use Simply Test Me, we used to bring down Dreditor, and there's a few other tools, that
Yeah.
we used to have contributors bring down. There's nothing for Tugboat that we need to have local or anything, correct?
Nope. They're literally as far as I can tell, like even if we were doing the DrupalCon like new contributor workshop, you could do that whole workshop just in the browser tools. I don't think you'd have to have any setup for anybody on their local laptops to get new contributors up to speed now.
That's incredible, because the new contributor workshops, the time we used to spend just setting up locals, getting all the tools, that was a whole process, and that would really detract from the contributors, because there'd be so many issues getting through that whole
So
process. Yeah,
overwhelming.
right, exactly.
I mean,
So, yeah.
I remember even, we tried to do it as an exercise at the Drupal Association and have a day where we just had all of our staff, including all our non-engineering staff, do the new contributor workshop, right? And it's like 80% of that was figuring out how to get local environments working. So.
Right. Great job. Thank you.
I can verify that, even as somebody, when I was working at OOMF with John Picozzi, and I came to the Drupal contributor weekend, and I spent like the whole day setting up my local environment so that I could, even though I was actually working on Drupal projects every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, and one of the things about this is we are still, part of the reason I'm here is like we're on our, what do they call it in politics? Our charm offensive. We're getting the word out about these new tools and about what's available. And we're hoping that people in their local camps, whenever they're doing contribution events, will all have the right up-to-date information, right? Because it is so much easier, but we need people to know that and teach people that when they're getting people on board. Because all the other old stuff still works. Technically, you can still upload regular patches. And of course, if you want to, you can do everything from the command line if that's where you're the most comfortable, using your local environments, all your IDEs. None of that's broken. It's just that you don't have to figure out all that stuff in order to be able to contribute.